Okay, so I'm going to talk about my grievances with modern cell phones. And in this video, I'm going to be specifically focusing on flagships. So no unusual yet interesting products like the PinePhone or Librem, and I'm sure there's going to be exceptions to this rule, but for the most part, I dislike where the industry is heading, and my first of my many grievances here, while not being the most egregious, it seems to be the general pattern with phones. So they're being designed to be disposable devices. That means companies are using planned obsolescence to get you to buy a new phone a few years down the line. So let's talk about something that pretty much every phone will have, is a lithium-ion battery. They have a lifetime about 500 recharge cycles, or for normal phone usage, about a year and a half before you're going to start noticing major battery life capacity decreases. So this isn't a flat line. Every time you charge it, it's going to be a little bit less when you refill it the next time. So every time you charge your phone, you lose a tiny little bit of battery capacity. And eventually, the rate that it decreases between each recharge cycle will accelerate. And I think for lithium batteries, I might be wrong, it's around 60%. So that would be fine and all, a year and a half, if the battery was easily replaceable. Keep in mind, some of these phones are going for $1,000 or more. I'd expect to get a product that lasts quite a while. So let's get on to the problem nowadays. So I recently opened up a Google Pixel 2 XL, and inside it was very difficult to actually replace the battery. It isn't just the fact of prying out the edges. It was more of a fact that the battery was adhered in with glue. And it's a lithium polymer cell. So the difference between lithium polymer and lithium ion essentially is what they use to separate the sheets out inside the battery. So that isn't much of a issue unless you think of the fact that you're about to be prying and heating up a battery that is constructed out of flammable metals, is holding power, and is, well, made out of plastic, which is also flammable. So if you're wondering why phone fire things happen, like I believe it was the Note 8 or maybe Note 9 and things like that, that was very popular in the media, but lithium polymer batteries are in fact a little bit dangerous when it comes to that, at least more dangerous than different battery chemistry. So doing that process, I wouldn't expect an average user or consumer to actually go through that level of effort and take on a little personal risk just to remove a battery from the back of the phone. While adhesive removal products do exist, again, the average consumer is probably not going to want to do this and will end up just going back and buying another smartphone. So another thing that they have been doing recently, I'm just talking about the cell phone industry in general, but this is probably more directed at Apple devices, is it seems they very much dislike third-party repair groups. I'm sure that if you watched Louis Rossmann, he's probably covered this a lot more than any 10-minute video can really. So because of that, the inability to repair your own device, combined with it being purposefully difficult by design to fix, it kind of makes it seem like they're trying to get the consumer to buy a product they don't necessarily need every year, or not every year, every few years, repeatedly, over and over, and I find that to be a little bit of a abhorrent business practice, or at least unethical. So the next thing is, in terms of how they're marketing this, is they are using artificial price segmentation. So essentially, one way to state this is to talk about SD cards. So a SD card slot is a very easily implementable device, and really should be there by default. Even if you're considering a phone that is waterproof, there's not really a reason not to add SD cards. They're small, compact, cheap, and allow the consumer to add more memory and storage to their device later on. But if you're a company and looking at this, it kind of defeats the purpose of selling a 16 gigabyte model your phone as well as a 128 gigabyte model for the same internal storage. So if you look at the iPhone 11 Pro, the 64 gigabyte model was sold for $999, where the iPhone 11 Pro Max is sold for about $1,349, so about $1,350. This $350 price difference is kind of ridiculous. You can buy a 512 gigabyte SD card for $84.99. Also a SATA SSD for about that price. For a little bit more, you could probably even get a cheap 1 terabyte one. So a issue of the cost of flash memory doesn't really explain this. They're segmenting the product line based off it being extremely difficult to upgrade the memory, where, well, the average buyer of a new smartphone should be able to replace an SD card relatively easily, and this would allow you to upgrade the storage later on. And also in the future, when flash memory gets a little bit more compact and you start seeing higher capacity SD cards, this would allow them to simply put in that newer device, the newer technology, and not have to worry about storage. So here are some general complaints before I talk about software. First is the ridiculous screen resolutions. No one can see 1440p at like 5 point something inches. Unless you're using this as like some sort of Google Cardboard type device, it's a completely pointless feature that is really just used to wow customers on a spec sheet. So if you're wondering why this is a common thing to do with smartphones, is the smaller a LCD panel is, the actual price to manufacture it is, well, cheaper. You can buy a 2048 by 1536 display for less than $100 with supporting hardware, where a typical 1920 by 1080 32-inch display will run you more than double. So another spec sheet complaint is cameras. It doesn't really matter how many megapixels a camera is if you're taking video in low light, unless you're using post-processing and multiple images. So although photographs can be improved with software and, like I said, multiple images, a bigger sensor, which isn't really possible on a mobile phone, is a much better solution. So smartphones, in fact, don't really make good cameras, rather than just, you know, for the typical, you're carrying it around everywhere and you want to take a photo or make a small video or something like that. But I feel like selling on camera quality is a little bit misleading, and you'd be much better off with a standard camera solution. So, such as a DSLR or a mirrorless, which you can get a used one for a lot cheaper than some of these flagship smartphones. So, the next thing, they are fragile. Well, I am a little bit clumsy, and this is more of a personal complaint rather than something that will apply to everyone. But a lot of people do use cases, and I'd much prefer something that is slightly thicker and durable than a case added to it. And that combined with how ridiculously difficult it is to compare these things compared to other hardware, a lot of people end up having screens crack and break, so they'll end up putting a case on, and then you just have something that's thick, a little bit ugly, and you defeated the point of all the design that went into making that phone as thin as possible. So I feel like the thinness of a smartphone isn't really a sales point or something they should be using, and is more of just a aesthetic choice that actually brings down the quality of a device. So another thing to add to that, I had a S5 Active, and while these models do exist, they are often cut down on features and a little bit more difficult to repair. And the micro USB port broke, and it became pretty much a brick. So I bought a refurbished one, and the same exact thing happened. So, but the thing to notice about this is I remember being a kid, I was probably even more clumsy, and I never killed a Game Boy Advance or a Nintendo DS, and I haven't really killed any laptops, so I don't really see the point, rather than just for competing based off specifications, even though it'll actually create a product that is going to be worse off for most people. So having a product that's easily damaged and hard to repair does typically encourage you to buy something again, I guess, or at least upgrade to the newer platform. So, and a lot of these things that happen over time with like, I think it was back for like the iPhone 6 Bendgate thing, it was actually a residual stress, where something that would happen after repeated use and repeated small amounts of stress that would actually kill it. So there's a lot of problems that actually occur just because of a desire to market them as thin as possible, and they aren't really problems for the smartphone manufacturer, they're problems for the consumer. So I guess now on to my final hardware complaint. Getting rid of the 3.5mm headphone jack that used to be standard for quite some time, probably a decade, maybe even more. So, at least on smartphones, I don't think I think the 3.5mm headphone jack's been around for quite a bit longer, but there's a few things that come with this. For example, it's beneficial if you're a company like Apple, that's also selling their own AirPods, and probably get some sort of licensing fee for people that make Apple products as well. And it allows them to have a second product line that people will actually profit from. And on the flip side, the consumer will be stuck with two devices to charge, and the inability to use something that was once common and is often quite a bit cheaper, which is the standard wired headphones. So the next thing, though, will be getting to the software. So my complaints on software for phones actually stem from a lot of things. First off, you're essentially carrying around something that is I would describe as Stalin's dream, or perhaps something that you'd come out of with from reading like 1984 or some sort of George Orwell book. It's a listening device that has GPS, cameras, microphones, and often you don't really have much control or can exactly see what's going on under the hood. So this device is with you everywhere. It has tracking information, and it can see and hear you. A little bit scary to me, but even for those less concerned about privacy, there are other issues that I have with the software on cell phones. For example, Android can be hard to root depending on the phone, and jailbreaks on iPhones are often very difficult. I haven't actually done any, but I have rooted Android before, and without rooting a phone, you have to deal with one thing which really, really annoys me. Probably the biggest annoyance out of everything. Ads. I have to look at ads for everything. Ad block is really hard to get working without rooting. I think Firefox for mobile might support extensions, but in general it is hard to get working on a mobile device, at least for the average person and the average phone user. So I really just want an experience without ads. I get they're probably mining my data, and the software is often bloated, and I haven't used iOS before, but I really just want a mainline Linux phone where this stuff is easy to set up and things like that, or at least something with NVIDIA's branch. I mean, I could deal with NVIDIA Tegra drivers or whatever on a smartphone, but for fuck's sake, you're carrying an internet-connected GPS, cameras, and a microphone with you, pretty much for a lot of people, almost at all times. It's ridiculous you don't have more control over the software. And particularly in iOS's case, they often try to make it more convenient to use other Apple products with it. And this kind of creates a ecosystem sort of synergy thing going on with their other product lines. This is also done with some Android devices, but I feel like it's less frequent. So there are solutions to this and software already out there that can improve the situation, but personally I don't feel like buying a product I dislike. So some of the software things you can do are Lineage OS and Replicant, which are both Android variants. And there are, like I said earlier, PinePhone, and I think Librem has one. But even now, I got this flip phone, and it comes with GPS and data. So, you know, if you pay $1,000 for a device, about the same price as a running used car, although in a bit trashy condition, you have a lot more control over the car. And the car probably will last a little bit longer. So, I guess as a final optimistic note, although I doubt anyone will care for my ideal cell phone design, first, let's make the thing thicker. You know, so it isn't so hard to open and you're not using adhesive to glue everything together. Maybe even make it thick enough to put an 18650 cell in. Something that's standardized, easily available, and is common enough that you can filter out Chinese clones. So you won't have to worry about replacing your battery in your phone with one made to lower manufacturing standards while appearing as it has the OEM packaging. Use an SD card, or even, you know, I can't ever hope for this, but mSATA or M.2, but that's being a little bit too hopeful if anyone comes out with a phone like that. Headphone jack, definitely a headphone jack. USB Type-C port, which can communicate with a dock, that'd also be nice. Or at least some sort of standard USB connection. USB 3.0 can actually transfer quite a bit of data. So support for mainline Linux would be nice. I've been using Core 2 Duo for quite a long time, and I imagine a modern smartphone will probably have a similar level or maybe even more performance out of these flagship models, but I feel like if I'm spending that much money, I should be able to use it as a computer and not just a device that makes calls and pretty much just used as a communication tool that also is probably spying on me. Why not actually make the thing durable after making it thicker and add a hardware switch for GPS and data and things like that, so you actually know it's off when it's off, and maybe a e-paper display option, which would actually make a lot of sense if you're having a device with, let's say, there's ARM architectures that often have some of the cores clocked at a much lower rate to reduce power consumption when the system is idling and not really doing much actively. So that combined with a e-paper display could theoretically make your phone have a much higher battery life, and you know, if I'm gonna go watch videos, I'm gonna choose a laptop or desktop or really anything with a bigger screen. So maybe that doesn't apply for everyone, but anyways, I apologize about the rant. I've been meaning to make a video about how I kind of feel about modern cell phones for a while though, and I gave you my ideal cell phone solution. So hopefully you guys are all having a good week, and maybe you enjoyed the video, maybe not. Anyways, just comment down below if you have any questions. This isn't really the typical thing I do on my channel. I typically do ThinkPad reviews, or not really reviews, more of repairs and LibreBoot and Core Boot videos. But if you're interested in any of those, I'd suggest maybe taking a look at some of my other videos. But peace and have a good one.